Hey everybody, my name is LaPretty and I am the Dominican Voodoo Spiritualist, and today I'm going to be talking about Cardi B and her Afro Caribbean claim. So to those of you who don't know, Cardi B right now is in a court case where she's being sued for assault that she allegedly committed back in 2018 when she was pregnant with her daughter Culture. And so I've been watching the clips, watching the scenes here and there. And one thing that stood out to me was when the lawyer, who I think is supposedly suing her or has issues with her, started asking her questions, to try to throw her off and to try to get her to reveal or to tell something that could hurt her case of winning this case. So when he asked her what her ethnicity was or what race she identified as, she said Afro Caribbean. And so I remember when I went on threads, this was a big discussion amongst people within the Latin community, the African American community, about whether Cardi B is Afro Caribbean, whether she's Afro Latina, whether she's this, whether she's that. And I think that I would like to discuss this topic here. I love talking about race and color and culture and ethnicity, and I like setting the record straight. So here we go. But Cardi B. Now, a lot of people get up in arms, a lot of people get irate, and a lot of people get highly defensive of Cardi B when it comes to her race, color, and ethnicity. My thing is, it ain't that serious, it's not that deep. Cardi B does not wake me up every day. She does not take me to work. She does not pay my bills. She does not buy my clothes, food, shoes, or nothing. So I don't owe her nothing. This is my lips, my opinion, my mindset, and this is how I'm gonna express myself. And other people, they can express themselves the way that they choose to as well. So, Cardi B being Afro Caribbean, if she wants to identify as that, she can. But at the same time, for the life of me, I wish that a lot of these artists that go by these different racial ethnicity classifications would teach and school people on their heritage instead of just claiming stuff just to be safe. I personally feel like Cardi B wants to hold on to her black card in the hip hop community, and that's why she keeps saying here and there, I'm a black woman, I'm a black Latina, I'm an Afro Latina, or I'm Afro Caribbean, as a way for her to be safe in the black community so that she can continue to thrive in the hip hop community. That's my opinion. I'm keeping it. Don't care if you feel different about it. The reason why I say that is because I feel as though Cardi B is scared to identify as Latina. She's scared to identify as Hispanic because she doesn't want to be seen as other. She doesn't want to be seen as someone who is not of the culture or someone who's not for the culture or someone who's not a part of the culture. And I mean, whether people like it or not, Cardi B is not African American. She's not. And Cardi B, for the most part, is not black, and that's just my opinion. The reason why I say that is because it's plain and simple. Cardi B is not black. Cardi B is a Caribbean American woman that so happens to have parents who are Dominican from the Dominican Republic and Trinidadian from the island of Trinidad. And the thing that floors me is that you have so many people who are not even Caribbean or Hispanic arguing me down and arguing other people down about what Cardi B is, what she isn't, what Trinidadian is, what Dominican is. And I mean, to each its own, have at it. But in my opinion, I think it's silly and I think it's stupid. And I really do think that it's kind of like eerie and a little weird that you're not of the culture or from the culture or have any lineage in the culture, and you're fighting and kicking and screaming and just demanding that people change their mindsets and read books and whatnot about a culture that doesn't even belong to you, and about a culture that you have no ties to, and a culture that you're not even connected with. I say on my channel all the time who I am and what I am. I am an American, but I do have heritage that links to many different places in this world. I have lineage heritage in the Caribbean, mainly, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic. I have lineage in Mexico. I have lineage in Nigeria and Ghana. I have lineage in Japan and the Philippines. I have lineage here in the United States, and I have lineage even with the Native American, population. I don't know what tribe I'm from, but I do know that I have blood, I have lineage that is indigenous or American Indian or Native American. And so I myself am an American that has a very mixed heritage and mixed culture and mixed lineages. And so, I could say it, and I know sometimes people who claim to be this and claim to be that don't know who they are, don't know what they are, but I do. When it comes to Puerto Rican culture, very well versed in it. When it comes to Cuban culture, Dominican culture, I'm very well versed in that. And I'm very aware of culture and ethnicity and race and color. When it comes to Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic, the islands are filled with people of many different ethnicities that are not black. In Cuba, you have Chinese Cubans, you have European Cubans, you have African Cubans. When I say African Cubans, I mean Cubans of African descent, which would make them Afro Cuban or Afro Latino. And sometimes people don't even understand what the term Afro Latino means. Some people think that an Afro Latina or an Afro Latino person is someone who is half black and half Hispanic. That's not what it means. An Afro Latin or an Afro Latino or an Afro Cuban, Afro Puerto Rican, Afro Mexican, this, that, and the third, is a person that is born in a Latin American country or a person whose parents or family was born in a Latin American country and their main bloodline or their main blood source comes from a sub Saharan African country. That's what Afro Latino means. Afro Latino, Afro Latina means a man or a female that was born in a Latin American country or whose family was born in a Latin American country, and the majority of their bloodline and the majority of their lineage comes from a sub Saharan African country. That's what it means. That's what it means. That's what it says. That's what it means. And for some reason, there's just so much confusion amongst people about that term. Afro Latino, Afro Latina means a man or a female that was born in a Latin American country, or they have family members that were born in a Latin American country whose bloodline consists of a majority of their bloodline consists of heritage or ancestry that comes from a sub-Saharan African country. That's what Afro Latino, that's what Afro Latina means. So since we have that, that's what that means. Now, in the Dominican Republic, I cannot stand for the life of me how people love talking about Dominicans, dogging Dominicans, bashing Dominicans, and spewing a lot of hatred, amongst Dominicans about the whole blackness. Me no black, I'm Dominican. Me no black, I'm Dominican. Yes, I will say there is racism amongst the Dominican culture. There is racism in the Dominican Republic, but for the most part, a lot of Dominicans claim their blackness. A lot of Dominicans are aware of them being black. A lot of Dominicans are aware of their afro features, their hair, their nose, their skin tone, their complexion. When you go to the Dominican Republic, like I have, and you go to the local areas, the rural areas, and the areas with everyday people, and not just the resorts, they use the same hair care products or similar hair care and beauty products that African Americans use because they have Afrocentric hair and melanated skin. They have to use shea butter, cocoa butter, body oil. They have to keep their hair moisturized and hydrated because if not, their hair and their skin will dry out and it will start to mess up and scratch up and cake up and, build up and this, that, and the third. So a lot of Dominicans are very aware of their blackness, of their African heritage. A lot of Dominicans, when you go to the island, and I don't know why there's so many, misconceptions about Dominicans and the culture and the lifestyle and how they think about hair. And I feel like a lot of people are just so accustomed to going to Dominican hair salons and seeing people with the Dominican blowouts and whatnot. They think that that's all there is to being Dominican. Is being light skinned or brown skinned, speaking Spanish, big boobs, big butt, dancing bachata, and having blown out hair. Like, there's more to being Dominican than just that. So when you go to a Dominican hair salon, that's only like a peak or like a bubble or like a window of like Dominican culture. That's not all that Dominican culture is. And then not only that, but Dominicans do wear their hair in other ways outside of the blowout. You have Dominicans, and even in the Dominican Republic, they have locks just like mine. They wear braids, they wear cornrows, they wear safe hairstyles that maintain their curls and keep their hair up and whatnot. Some Dominicans use relaxers like black people do to straighten their, when I say black people, African Americans, they do press on, they do silk presses. They use relaxers, they use perms, and they use, the types of hair care products, Sulfur 8 and Blue Magic and this, that, and the third. Now, that may not be what they use culturally, but when they come here in the United States, more than likely they probably will start using that in their hair. Because if you grow up in an environment, in a community that's not fully Dominican or has a lot of Dominicans, but you live amongst people like African Americans who share the same skin tone, complexion, and hair texture that you do, they're going to use the same hair care products. So I can understand how when it comes to Cardi B, there is an automatic claim of her from the black community because of her being Dominican. I mean, let's just be honest here. When most people see a melanated person, a dark skinned person, brown skinned person speaking Spanish, we automatically think, oh, they must be Dominican. I remember growing up in school, speaking Spanish. And when people would guess my ethnicity or my culture that I was, the first thing they would say, oh, you must be Dominican. It never came to their mind that I was, Cuban and Puerto Rican because I hate to say it, but a lot of Americans have a set or a built in mindset or a built in perception about what each nationality should look like. Everybody thinks Puerto Ricans are supposed to be light skinned, mixed looking, with dark curly hair like Bad Bunny. When it comes to Cubans, everybody thinks we're supposed to look like the Cubans in Miami. That's white skin, big boobs, big butt, real bougie, driving around in the Bugattis and the nice cars. And when it comes to Dominicans, everybody thinks that, oh, they supposed to look like hood black people with the braids, the tattoos, and the locks, and the big booties and stuff, and speaking Spanish, and and that's just the built-in mindset that a lot of people have about Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Cubans. But at the end of the day, all Puerto Ricans, all Cubans, and all Dominicans are not the same. And I say that to say that when it comes to Dominicans, especially since we're on the topic of Cardi B, all Dominicans are not black. You have Dominicans that are Spanish, you have Dominicans that are indigenous, you have Dominicans that are black. And you have Dominicans who identify as black, some identify as white, some identify as Indian, because in the Dominican Republic, they do call themselves Indian, which means Native American or indigenous. Or you have some people who say that they're mixed. There's a word in the Dominican Republic that is called trigueño or trigueña, which means that you're a mix of all three, the black, the white, and the Indian. And even in the 21 divisions, which is Dominican voodoo, which is what I practice, that religion consists of the three main ethnic groups that are present in the Dominican Republic because you have the white division, the black division, and the Indian division. And so that's kind of self explanatory enough what Dominicans consist of. So it baffles me and it really tickles me how people are just so obsessed with race and skin tone and complexion and heritage. And yeah, Cardi B can identify with whatever she wants to identify with. That's her right, that's her business. But at the end of the day, I feel like Cardi B should eventually, if she wants to, be herself. Because I mean, when you think about it, Cardi B is not black. When you look at Cardi B's come up and whatnot, and when you look at a lot of her pictures and whatnot as a child and even amongst family members, yes, she does have family members that come in a plethora of different skin tones and complexions. Whether people believe it or not, most Hispanics and most Caribbean people have mixtures of colors and hair textures within their families because Caribbean culture is very mixed and multi ethnic. Like I said before, you have Cubans that are Chinese, you have Dominicans that are black, you have Puerto Ricans that are Chinese, you have Jamaicans that are Chinese. So a lot of these islands that people are so used to and accustomed to because of popularity, music, and travel, just because you see that in your experience doesn't mean that that tells the whole story of what Caribbean people are and what Caribbean heritage is. And so, when you say Cardi B is black, to each its own, you could say that she is, but Cardi B, more than likely, she's not black. Cardi B is like a lot of Caribbean women from New York. It's obvious that Cardi B grew up very Hispanic. She speaks Spanish. Every time you see her in pictures or in videos with her family members, it's always in the Dominican Republic. It's always her speaking Spanish. When she's in the kitchen holding her baby, you hear bachata music or merengue music being played, and that is Spanish Dominican music. And even the way that she comes off and carries herself is like that of a very astute and very pristine Dominican woman. A lot of people don't notice about Dominicans, but in Dominican culture, dressing nice, being pristine, being dressed to the nine, hair looking good, skin looking good, body on 10, and plastic surgery, that is a part of Dominican culture. Like, if you were really Dominican or really Caribbean, you would know this. Like, Dominican culture is all about being pristine, being precise, being astute, being well versed, being well educated. Like, a lot of people think that, Dominican New York culture, with the hood, ghetto, and the rap and the tattoos and all that, they think that that's all that Dominican culture is. But when you're in the Dominican Republic, and when you're in the culture and when you see like the different types of lifestyles, and even when you know the history of the Dominican Republic, it's not like that. Like the Dominican Republic is based off of, you know, Spanish culture, Catholic culture, family, being very traditional, believing in the Bible, believing in Christ, believing in God. And yes, Dominicans do practice voodoo because I practice Dominican voodoo. And so voodoo is present in the Dominican Republic. But people know in the Dominican Republic that even if you do practice voodoo, even though it's well known in the Dominican Republic, you still have to either lie and say you don't practice it if people ask you, or you can say you practice it, but you have to be careful about where you go when you practice it and who you say it in front of. Because there is that duality, but there's also that pride and that shame that comes with practicing voodoo in the Dominican Republic. And so, and we see that with Cardi. That's why Cardi B wasn't so open about practicing Santeria and believing in the Orishas and the saints and whatnot. Because in Dominican culture, yeah, it's prevalent. Yes, it's practiced. Yes, that's what you do if you grew up believing in that or if it was introduced to you and your family. But for the most part, that's not something you broadcast. That's not something that you show off to the world or really brag about like that. And see, people who are not Caribbean and people who are not Dominican, they don't know that. They don't understand it. And that's why I don't understand why there's this big argument and this big defense for Cardi when it comes to her race and ethnicity. Like a lot of y'all that's fighting me and fighting other folks, y'all are not Caribbean. Y'all are not Hispanic. Y'all don't even have like ancestors who came from the Caribbean or who came from the different Hispanic cultures and whatnot to even have this argument or to even say anything about Afro Caribbeans, Afro Latinos, and Afro this, that, and the third. If you don't have a tie to the culture, if you don't have a footing in the culture, if you don't have heritage in the culture, then you really shouldn't be arguing about it because it doesn't affect you like it affects us who identify with it. It doesn't affect you like it affects the people who live and breathe in that culture and practice the traditions and the beliefs like we do. So, that's that. But when it comes to Cardi B and her, oh, I'm Afro Caribbean or I'm Afro Latina or, I'm black and whatnot. I feel like she's just doing that to be safe when it comes to black people because she knows how hard we ride for her when it comes to hip hop, when it comes to society, when it comes to culture. And she knows that if she moves away from her blackness or her black culture, her black identity, that she's not going to be seen as a part of the culture or a part of the community or a part of us anymore. And to be honest, Cardi B is playing it smart. Cardi B is playing it smart because a lot of people do not understand what it's like to be black, but to be a certain type of black, because I've even experienced it. When I identify as African American, I've been treated like trash, not heard, not spoken to, ignored, men looking down at me, treating me like dirt, treating me like trash. But when I identify with my Jamaican culture, or when I identify with my Dominican culture or Puerto Rican culture, respect, love. People come to me, people respect me, people see me and people, bat an eye at me and whatnot. It's different. And like I said, I've lived it and breathed it to know it and understand it. And that's what people don't understand. And then when you even look at Cardi B doesn't even look as black as she used to. When Cardi B came out as a stripper and when she came out as, love and hip hop personality, I'm a stripper, I'm from the Bronx, look at that money that I'm making. She came up with all them catchphrases. She was black back then. She had the messed up teeth, the big nose with the fishtail braids and stuff, and the little hood ghetto look and the makeup and the little pixie cut wig she used to be wearing. Like, she was black back then. But it's like as time has gone on and how she's become more famous and more astute and more richer and more successful, she's watered down a lot of her blackness. Her nose is not black anymore. Her lips are not even as black anymore. Her face is not even like as African based as it used to be. She's chiseled her face and chiseled her eyes and cheeks and had so much construction done, she doesn't even look like a black woman, let alone an Afro-Latino, Afro Caribbean woman anymore. So if she was so black and if she was so pro-black and I'm black this and I'm black that, then why did she erase her black features? We would have still loved her if she would have stayed the same. So it's obvious that it was something in her or something about her that she didn't like, that she felt the need to change. Because a lot of y'all that like to come at people for calling out what it is or what it's not, y'all never really think about stuff like that. If you claim this woman to be as black as she is, then why is it that she doesn't, claim her blackness all the time? And why is she so afraid to break down her identity, to break down who she is? And why did she change her black features, like her nose and her cheeks and her face and her eyes? Like Cardi B now looks less Afro Dominican and looks more mixed Dominican or even Asian Dominican to an extent. She looks like a Spanish Asian woman now. And so a lot of y'all don't think that. And yeah, we've had, the Nene Leaks and the Lil Kims and the Nicki Minaj's. Well, Nicki Minaj is out of this because she's Caribbean too. But I'm sticking to like, black women, like African American women that we compare Cardi to as far as like the hip hop culture and hip hop world. Like, yeah, we've seen them, skin bleach and change their face and get all this surgery done to look like a Barbie or to look more like a white woman. But I just feel like if Cardi B is so black and so this and so that, why not keep your black features? And I understand you have to change up and you have to elevate with the times and you have to upgrade and update. But at the same time, if you claim to be so black and if you claim to be so Afro this and Afro that, why didn't you celebrate that in your looks? And why did you get it chiseled and sharpened and just shaven down like that? And that's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. And then on top of that, Cardi B does not respect black women at all. There have been plenty of cases of Cardi B being very rude and disrespectful and hateful towards black women. And I hate to say it, but that's kind of like a known thing with Latin women sometimes. Because let's just call it for what it is. And the thing that I hate that African Americans like to do is that we like to bypass and we like to ignore a lot of racism that has been done to us or placed on us. And a lot of racism that we've even been made to go through in order to have good experiences with the Hispanic community. I mean, let's call it for what it is. It's a known fact that there is a lot of anti blackness in the Caribbean community and in the Hispanic community, even amongst Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Dominicans, Haitians, Jamaicans. Like, some of y'all won't even believe me if I tell y'all how many anti black experiences I've had with Haitians, with Puerto Ricans, with Dominicans, and Cubans, and Jamaicans, and whatnot. Like, just because they're black or Afro this and Afro that does not mean that they love and like their blackness like that. And then we also have this thing of who's considered black and who's not, and the definition of blackness. When it comes to African Americans, I feel like some of this overclaiming that we like to do with other black people in the black diaspora, it comes from us wanting to be associated with something that's not American. Because, like I said, I know what it's like to be in America and to be treated like trash. And then when you see the Jamaicans and the Haitians and the Dominicans that's black, come here and they get treated like royalty. They're just as dark as us, their hair is just as kinky as us, their lips and nose and cheeks are just as chunky and thick and big as ours, but they get treated like a human being and we get treated like a second class citizen. And in most cases, or in some cases, we've been in this country longer than they have, but they get treated better than we do. And a lot of us like to ignore that and we like to excuse it and we like to make it seem as though it doesn't exist and that it doesn't matter. And I'm not trying to make it this whole Black Americans against Afro Caribbeans, Afro Hispanics, but let's just call it for what it is. A lot of us are not embraced in their circles like that. A lot of us are not welcome in their spaces like that unless we're physically attractive, unless we're financially stable, unless we're special, or we have some type of star status or star quality about us that makes them feel comfortable to be associated with us or around us like that. It is what it is. We've seen it with Evelyn Lozada on Basketball Wives. We've seen it with a lot of these, Instagram models and video vixens and with reality TV stars that have dated prominent black men but had no respect or little to no love for the black women. Or, like always, they had the black woman as the sidekick, trailing along and following behind every little thing that they do and ignoring the little subtle hints of racism and colorism and classism that's coming out of the mouth of their light skinned Latina friend. And I'm not saying that, all friendships are like that or that all friendships are going to be like that. But, let's just call it for what it is. It does exist like that. It does exist like that. And I feel like with this overclaiming that we do with, Caribbeans and Hispanics, is us wanting to feel special, to be associated with, someone who's not American. And, and I'm just calling it for what it is. That's how I see it and that's what I feel. But with Cardi B, I feel like she's playing it safe because she wants to be respected in the black community. She wants to have a place or rank in the black community because she knows that rap music is black. She knows that hip hop is black, and she knows that she has to remain black in order to be seen as a prominent and successful female rapper in a black area or in a black arena or in a black sport. So that's just pretty much all that I'm saying about Cardi B. But I just feel like with Cardi B, if she wants to be Afro Caribbean or Afro Latina, she should just cut through a lot of this confusion with like the fans. Tiana Starks. Hey girl, it's nice seeing you. You're most definitely right. Oh, hey Tiana Starks. Thank you for coming to my live. But yeah, it's like with Cardi B, and this is how Tyler got messed up. The girl who had that song Water that was popular on TikTok that's now canceled. This little racial stuff is what got her in trouble. Because with Cardi B, I feel like and my thing is with Cardi B might not do nothing about it because she liked the buzz, she liked the rave, she liked the attention. So she's gonna be like, let them have at it. It's making me gold, it's making my name pop. You doing videos on me, so I'm relevant. So let them have it. So she's might not feel the need to explain nothing because she want the rise and want the attention. But I feel as though, Cardi, if you're going to identify with Afro Caribbean or with Afro Latina, School the class, teach a lesson, give us insight, give us the real definition of what that means. Because if you're going to be in black spaces amongst black people who overlove you and overclaim you, then you need to teach the lesson. Be the teacher. You already the star, and people already look up to you for clarity and answers and, admiration. Why not teach the class? And teach the people that's riding for you and looking up for you. That's all you had to do. And I feel like even with Tyler, that's what she should have did. Because Charlamagne the God, he irked me when he asked her, "So what race are you? Are you black or whatever?" And I know he's interested in everything, and there's nothing wrong with that. But black people, African Americans, are just so obsessed with race and skin tone and complexion to the point where it is just disgusting in a way, and it's annoying. Like every time they see somebody that's mixed, the light skin with pretty hair, oh, she must be Dominican. Or I wonder what she mixed with. She Puerto Rican, she Cuban. What race is she? Why she so light? Why she so this? And like I said, there's nothing wrong with being interesting because I do it too. I see somebody of a certain race, I know they're Dominican, I know they're Puerto Rican, or I know they're mixed with Asian and black or whatever. We do it all the time. It's natural. But I just feel like sometimes African Americans kind of over obsessed with mixture and lightness and curly hair, good hair, and all of that to the point where it's coming off as a fetish. We talk about this stuff all the time with the black community with colorism and racism and isms, but a lot of times we fail to realize that we do it too. Because I'm gonna be honest with y'all, like people love wanted to work and wanted to be amongst people of different races and colors and ethnicities. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I have experienced more colorism and racism from people who look like me and from people from my communities that I identify with more than I have from white people. When it comes to Latinos, I have experienced some extreme cases of colorism and elitism and racism and even featureism with African Americans, with black people. You can't be too dark, can't be too brown, can't be too black looking with your hairstyles, with your clothes, with the way your body is shaped. And this is the thing that irks my soul. And I'm not even going to go on a rant, but it kills me how people are so obsessed with other people's body shapes. Like people act like they can't be friends with somebody unless you thick, got a big booty, got a round butt, got a shapely behind, or you got a thick figure, or if you skinny, or if you pretty, got pretty skin, pretty eyes, pretty hair, or and then won't even be friends or give somebody the time of day or even be nice to somebody unless they look a certain way or whatever. Now I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I love men that's fine, and when it comes to women that's pretty, I'll give you a compliment or whatever, but I've never been the type to dog somebody out because I didn't think they was attractive. And I've never been the type to go out of my way to be rude or disrespectful to somebody because I didn't think they was pretty or fine. And it's like, it's sad of the stuff that I've seen Hispanics and black people do to people because they don't think that they're pretty or they don't think that they're attractive, and it's wild and it's real. And people don't always like to, talk about that. But my thing is with Cardi, like I said, she loved the rise and buzz, but give an explanation. I feel like with Tyler, when Charlemagne the God asked her what race or what color ethnicity she was, she said that she was colored by her being South American and colored in South America, not South America, sorry, South Africa means a mixed race person or a person of multiple ethnicities. And she could have broke that down to people who are aware of South Africa and South Africa's history. They had segregation in South Africa. The apartheid was all about, making racism against the law. Because in South Africa, you had the Africans that were like, I think the Dutch African people or like the white South Africans. You had, I think, I don't want to say Portuguese because I used to know a lot of this historical stuff long, long time ago, but I forgot about it over the years. But in South Africa, they do have different racial categories because you had the Africans who were like the Dutch or Portuguese South Africans who were white. Then you had the black South Africans, and then in South Africa, I believe you had Southeast Asians or Southeast Indians. You know, people from India, because people don't know Indian people have been all over the world as far as cultural influence. And when I say Indian, I'm talking about from India, Asia, India. Because, like I said, you'll find Indian people in Africa and Latin American countries and Caribbean countries in European countries. Like Indians don't get the credit, but a lot of Indians, like Asian Indians, have had a large influence over a lot of cultures. But but yeah, like, and I felt like Tyler could have used that moment to break that down. Cause it's like we've had the Afro-Latino, the Afro-Caribbean conversation for a really long time, and I felt like she could have broke that down with Africans because, you know, there's been tension and little tips between African Americans and Africans. And so she could have, you know, broke that down. She could have been the bridge. Because we've had, you know, our fair share of African music artists coming through the mill like Tim's, DeVito, and Area Star and Burna Boy and whatnot. So they've been immersed in American culture and have gained our respect. And you know, Chris Brown, you know, he's a multifaceted artist, and he's done music with Latin artists, but he's done a lot of music with, you know, African artists like DeVito and so on and so forth. So I felt like since we already been introduced to Afrobeat music and the different African cultures, such as the Ghanaian and Nigerian culture and whatnot, I felt like Tyler could have used it as a, and she could have said, you know, well, here in the United States, I would be considered black, but in my home country of South Africa, I'm considered this. So she could have broke all of that down instead of just trying to like dodge and hide and whatnot, because it just messed her up entirely. Because that lets you know how potent blackness is. Like blackness, when you have black blood, you have power. When you are a black person, whether you are African, European, Hispanic, Caribbean, or American, if you have black blood, black ancestors in you, you are powerful. You are a movement, you are a moment. And so when you mess that up or get that misconstrued or misuse that, it's going to have some consequences. Like it is gonna have some consequences. We see it with, you know, men disrespecting black women, people disrespecting black men, and people disrespecting, you know, black American culture. We see the aftermath of how it is when a person gets told or gets got for disrespecting us. You know, so that says a lot. But, you know, going back to what I said about Cardi B, I feel like Cardi B needs to teach the class. If she don't feel the need to, you know, that's her business. But I'm saying like get your money, get your clout, get your attention. But I'm saying like we've had this conversation long enough and it's tiring and it's old and it's boring. Like explain to people what Afro-Latino is. Explain to people what Afro-Caribbean is. And then another thing, just because her mom is Trinidadian does not make her black. Just like how if her dad is Dominican, it does not make her black. Like I said, in the Dominican Republic, the Dominican culture consists of Spanish, African, and indigenous. And in Trinidad, you have Indian Trinidadians. And when I say Indian Trinidadians, Trinidadian people that have Asian Indian heritage, like Nicki Minaj, because Nicki Minaj is a Trinidadian born woman. She was born in Trinidad. Both of her parents are Trinidadian, but her mom is a Afro Trinidadian or a Trinidadian woman of African descent. And her dad was a dougla. And the term dougla in Trinidad is somebody who's half black and half Indian. And so her dad was a dougla. He was Indian and he was African, you know, Trinidadian. And she did say she had a grandma or a grandpa on her dad's side that was Japanese. So in other words, her dad was a Blasian Trinidadian. And you know, her sister Ming looks straight up Blasian, almost more Asian than anything. And her sister is Trinidadian, but you know, by them being Caribbean, that's why they're so mixed. And that's what people don't understand. That in Caribbean culture, and I even remember I had a teacher in middle school because my middle school was very diverse. You had Caribbeans, Hispanics, you had a whole bunch of people that went to my school. And I had a teacher that was Trinidadian. And I remember I did a project on Indo-Caribbean culture, and I remember she was Indo-Trinidadian, and she told me that in Trinidad that we're Trinidadian first and we're our ethnicity second. Because the thing about this country is that we don't have national unity. When we think of nationalism, we think of white supremacy. But when it comes to the Hispanic culture and the Caribbean culture, they see nationality as that's our family, that's our identity, that's our fabric. That's who we are. So, which is why when you see people from Mexico, I'm Mexican. You know, people from the Dominican Republic, I'm Dominican. Puerto Rico, I'm Puerto Rican. Jamaican, Cuban, Trinidadian. I'm Trinidadian, I'm Jamaican, I'm Cuban. Before they will say black or Indian or whatever, because they don't see ethnicity and race and color like we do over here. You know, like I said, my teacher who was Indo Trinidadian, she said, in our culture, we're Trinidadian first and we're Indian second. And so that's pretty much what it is. This whole thing about Cardi B being black, Cardi B being this, that, and the third is old and it's tiring, but I just feel like Cardi B just needs to be herself and she needs to be okay with that. And she just needs to go ahead and say it. And then I also don't think that it's fair how Cardi B has bullied a lot of people behind the scenes. There have been a lot of bloggers and, content creators that have been bullied by Cardi B and told to take stuff down because they talked about her blackness and her family, or they even talked about her practicing Santeria or her being pregnant. Like, people have been told to take stuff down or they're going to be sued or whatever. And then months or so later, she's coming out pregnant. Months or so later, she's a child of a Chelsea. I mean, we see it, we saw it. And, and some people might get mad about me saying this about Cardi B or whatever. To be honest with y'all, I'm not scared of Cardi B. God loves me just as much as he loves her. And I practice the same religion that Cardi B practices. I'm a child of Oshun. She's a child of Ochosi. So when you in the same religion as people and whatnot, you could try to go toe to toe, but you won't get far. Because when you start tussling and bustling with family, it's you won't go far with that. Because Caribbeans know and people who practice the African traditional religions is that you could use whatever forces you want to use to fight. But if you fighting somebody in your own community or within your own spiritual family, you're not going to go far because you can't use the same weapons and the same forces that the other person is using to take them out. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. So I hope you guys enjoy this live, enjoy this conversation. Please share your views and your opinions in the comments section. Feel free to subscribe and follow me here and have a good night.